So we were talking about child justice.
Mm-hmm. So Section 28 of the Constitution links then to the Child Justice Act. So I think there's a reluctance sometimes for people to go to the police station and open a case against a child offender. Child that maybe steals, a child that hits other children, a child that harasses the parents at the house. I'm involved in a case where the girl, due to emotional problems, would hit her mother and scream at her. And then parents sometimes would say, no, but it's my child and I don't want to lay a charge against him or her. But it's necessary sometimes, because how else are we going to get treatment for that child if the system, if you don't use the system, if I can put it like that. And the Constitution, there's nothing in the Constitution that says a child shouldn't be, in terms of Section 28, shouldn't be prosecuted. It just says that there's certain safeguards in place. For example, if a child is arrested, the child must be kept in custody as short period as possible, okay, which makes sense. The child must be not kept with other adult offenders, so anybody older than 18, and they must be treated in a child-friendly, that sounds strange, but I mean in a child-friendly manner. So especially if it's a youngish child, that they are not treated the same as an adult. So there's nothing in the Constitution that says children shouldn't be prosecuted. And if you look at the child justice system, a lot of the children, especially the teenagers, if you do get them into that system, there's nice treatment programs, because a lot of times a child that acts out in terms of hitting other children or hitting a parent or damaging property, there's a reason behind it. And if you don't get the children into a system, you will never find out the reason why that child is acting that way, and you won't get the appropriate help that is needed. And unfortunately, it's sad, children for whatever reason nowadays do act out, and a lot of them comes from their own emotional problems. They are caught up maybe in high conflict divorces, high conflict relationships, and the only way for them to deal with it is by acting out, by behaving badly, and we need to address it, and the system is there for it to be addressed. So maybe the plea to grandparents and parents out there, don't think don't think it's going to go away, because those children, if they then become adults and they then offend, we can't protect them, because then they're adults. Then they must be dealt with in terms of a much harsher system, where if we can get these children at a younger age and deal with whatever is wrong, it's much better for them. So bite the bullet, what the Americans call it tough love, maybe have that tough love, and take the child and go and lay the charge at the police station to help the child. Ultimately, it is for the child's help. Then Section 28 also talks about they not to use directly in armed conflict, and also they need extra protection in time of conflict. The wording of the Constitution it says directly in an armed conflict. I suppose also not indirectly, although it doesn't say so, but it would make it's not going to be okay if you use a child indirectly in an armed conflict. So don't use a child in an armed conflict. I think that's the message. In any kind of where they can be exposed. And I think a while ago I watched a program on CNN where there's regions in the world where child soldiers is still a very big reality, and where they are dragged into the conflict, not necessarily a war, but more your gang-related kind of violence, which I suppose is just a different kind of conflict, but they are then pulled into that for criminal reasons. But it's still a conflict, and that they are given the automatic rifle or the weapon to take part of that. And I'm not aware of anything like that in South Africa, but Just because I'm not aware doesn't mean it's not happening. But the Constitution specifically says that that should not happen at all. Then just one thing that people are still don't know is that the Constitution says a person is a child up until the age of 18. A lot of times people still wonder about that. They think that 18, you know, they must still act for the child and they must still help the child. This really becomes a problem in terms of maintenance, because you'll find a lot of children at the age of 18 are still at school. Maybe they're doing grade 11 or grade 12, and then there's a maintenance problem. The one parent would stop paying maintenance, and then you would want, then whoever the child is residing with would want to go with the child, open a case for maintenance at the maintenance court. But strictly speaking, that child is not a child anymore. So that child must, in her or own name, start the maintenance case against the other parent. And I understand the fear. I think people look at the fact that they're still at school and therefore they're still a child. So I understand the problem behind it, but it's just about the majority. They're not, in legal terms, they're not a child anymore. They need to act in their own capacity. This is also something, if you get, a lot of times people will call and say, but they will tell you a long story about my child this and my child that and this and the following, and then you will ask the person, okay, but how old is this child? Then they will tell you now 21 or 22. Then I say, okay, well, I understand it's your child, but in terms of a legal environment, that person is an adult, and whatever that child wants, that he or she must do it in their own name. So this is it's still problematic. If I remember correctly, when they looked at this age of majority, one must remember when they wrote the Children's Act and they re-looked the age of majority, we were going through a HIV and AIDS pandemic, and a lot of children were without parents, and we then were still stuck with the 21-year majority age. And the idea was that if you have this child that doesn't have a parent anymore, now this child must wait until 21 before they can start acting in their own capacity. So that was part of the argument of bringing the age down to 18. But yeah, that I know that is still problematic. Section 28, if you read it together with the Children's Act, a lot of times it's not only, I think, for us to enforce, but it's also, one must remember that if you look at Section 28, it talks about basic nutrition, shelter. So you as a parent, as a grandparent, this is all falls to you also. So it's not only a legal environment for us to enforce. It is something you must actually enforce also, as just provide the basic needs and shelter and education. Again, if you read, especially education, and it is problematic, if you read it with the Schools Act, a child is it must go to school until the age of 16. That's the compulsory age. Thereafter, yes, it's the choice of the child. Maybe I mustn't say it too out loud, because I'm sure there's children out there that can say, okay, well, I don't have to go to school anymore. That's not the idea. But unfortunately, you get people nowadays that don't send children to school. It doesn't say so in the Constitution, and it doesn't say so in the Children's Act, but if you go and look at the School Act, it says you must send a child to school. And if you think about it, you're also neglecting your child by not sending the child to school. So what are you're going to get a child that cannot write properly or are illiterate, because that's what they go to. And socializing, the social workers and psychologists will tell you that especially young children like 6 or 7, they need to go to school, because that's where they learn to socialize, how to interact with other children. I know homeschooling nowadays is a big thing, but again, it must be schooling. So I'm not saying no, don't do homeschooling. I'm just saying be aware that the child must go to school in any kind of environment until they are 16. That is what that the law says. Okay, so yeah, I don't know if that's Section 28 of the Constitution in a nutshell. to what the Constitution promises our children and what we need to enforce, and to make sure that children receive what they need to receive.
Fantastic. We have a few questions.
Okay.
Monique asks where she can find a family law book. Where is she able to find that online? Or, I mean, yeah, anywhere.
A family law book. Family law as a part of the law forms part of what we call the law of persons and family. So I think let me think. Family law. You see, family law also is divided up in children's law, and then it's divided up into more your matrimonial kind of law. So that will then mean divorces, marriages. It depends on what part of the family law. So if you want to look at purely children's law, and you want to, there's books on that will give you like a legal explanation of the Children's Act. But I think there's nice articles maybe that you can just go and look online that will just give you the basic of children's rights. I know if you just want to think, it's the African Charter on the Rights of Children. If you Google that, they actually, it's the UN one. They have like a user-friendly one. And if you start there, I'm sure if you follow the links from that, you will find hopefully eventually what you want. But that's a bit of a wide field to say there's one book that's going to give you an answer.
Fantastic. We're also getting some questions on where people can find the children's courts. Where are they?
Okay. So any magistrate court is a children's court. And I think in the bigger cities it's easier because there's a magistrate court, and any magistrate court usually has a maintenance court, a domestic violence court, and a children's court. So if you are in a biggish town or city, the city is the easiest, but a biggish town will have a magistrate court, and at that magistrate court there will be a children's court. Then also I know in the small towns, they will have a children's court that will visit, that will have a periodical children's court that will come with the maintenance court. Usually those three courts are linked. Your maintenance court, your domestic violence, and your children's court. They, in generic terms, we will call them family courts because they deal with anything and everything that a family that will deal with the family. So I think the easiest answer is your magistrate court. Any magistrate court will also have a children's court, and it's only your small towns that you might struggle a bit. It's not going to be a permanent court.
And you also mentioned there that the maintenance court is also at magistrate's court.
Yeah, so those three courts: domestic violence, family court, children's court, and maintenance court. Those three usually go together. For example, in Gauteng, Diepsloot has now started a court, and the three courts that they started with the two courts is maintenance and domestic violence. So that's usually your first entrance kind of courts, because those are the ones that affect the communities the most, is your maintenance and your domestic violence. So you'll find that even in your far off rural areas, that they will try to start with that. The children's court sometimes is not always part of the package, but it is part of the family law system, family court system.
Okay. And you mentioned maintenance, and we're also getting a few questions around if Legal Aid South Africa assists children with deceased estates. So if a parent passes away, could you maybe elaborate on that, please?
Okay.
Do we assist, and where would they go?
It's one of those answers, yes, but. It's one of those answers. So yes, we do, but then it must be what we call a Section 18.3 estate. So that would be the estate that's less than 250,000 rand. So there's a minor child that's a beneficiary, then yes, then we would help. But any estate above that, I'm going to rather say no than yes. But so your smaller estate, we do the administration, yes. Okay. We have an agreement with the Master of the High Court to assist with those estates,
Okay, fantastic. And then this is actually a question I have. You mentioned that children, if they are arrested or detained, they would need to be in a child-friendly, detained or in a child-friendly manner or in a facility. And I am aware that we do have a few countrywide. I'm not quite sure of the name, but it's the One-Stop Child
Justice Center.
Yes, the One-Stop Child Justice Center. Could you maybe explain how those work and where that would come in?
So the idea was that you will have a place where children are dealt with holistically. So they will have a place where they can go to school, but they are also, I want to say kept. It's a wrong word maybe. But let's take there's one in here in Gauteng, the Shushunguve Secure Care. So it's not a children's home like in the traditional sense. It's for children with behavioral problems. So they are kept, they're not in prison, but that's why they call it the secure care. So yes, there is a sense of security. You can't just walk out at 4 o'clock and go to the shops. There is a bit of a detainment element to it. So those are usually the children, but it's a one-stop justice center. So everything is there. They provide the children with everything. That is the idea. I know they've been struggling. I'm talking under correction, but I think there's one in Gauteng. I know there's one in Bloemfontein, and there was one in PE. Is there one in Northwest also? Okay. So that was the idea, that you have this in terms of the child justice system, this one-stop place where if children are helped. But that is for children that goes through the child justice system, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in terms of that, so they would then be detained there, and then there's also the opportunity for them to perhaps, I suppose, depending on the offense or the charge, the type of charge, that they could then also even undergo the
programs,
court, like the trial. Will there.
Yeah, so the courts are usually not there, but the programs we talk about, if you are in the child justice court, instead of being sentenced, you are diverted. So diversion usually entails programs. Anger management would be a program, maybe some kind of family preservation program. So the programs are also dealt with at that center, so that they're not so you don't have to go and take them to 3 different places to undergo the programs. Yeah.
And then lastly, Elizabeth, you mentioned that a child had previously contacted Childline, and that was how we became aware of their predicament, and we ended up assisting them. But if we are mandated to assist children, how then is it that families or children can contact us? Or is it, are we appointed by the court? Does the court kind of bring us in, or can they contact us beforehand? Are they also welcome to come to an office if they have access to one?
So I think Childline, we have an agreement with Childline also. So if they think that there's a child that needs legal representation, they can refer to us. Then the courts are, I think, our main point of reference, because we are appointed by the courts in children's court matters to act for children, and the Children's Act makes provision for that in any way. Then there's the high courts that would then sometimes appoint us as curators or as legal representatives if they are of the opinion that, going back to Section 28 of the Constitution, you'll remember I spoke about the substantial injustice. So that is a little bit of a test. A lot of times that the High Courts would use to when is a legal representative necessary, for a minor child. So that idea of the substantial injustice. And then the Centre of Child Law and Legal Aid many moons ago published a little booklet, I'm sure it's still available somewhere, where they try to make a list of cases where we would say substantial injustice would occur. And I'm not going to, that list is quite long, so I'm not going to go into that now. So that's the one other way for us to get involved. And like you say, yes, the child coming to a legal aid office and say, here I am, I want to apply for legal aid. There's absolutely nothing stopping a child, especially the teenagers. Here in Tembisa, where I am, 2 years ago, we had 2 different teenage girls that actually got into a taxi after school, went to the children's court themselves and opened the case in their own name or by themselves. So children, especially your older children, they are more aware of their rights, and they are now, and if they're not, they're brave, they're gonna come and say, here I am, I want help with this, specifically one of them, she was being assaulted by her mother and her older sisters, and she just said, well, I had enough. The court must evict my mother and my sisters out of the house. So the children are becoming more aware of their rights. So yes, do they want to come to a local office, they're more than welcome to do that also. Okay, so thank you for joining us today. And if you have any questions about this topic or any topic, or you just want some general advice, we have an advice line on 0800 110 110, and they are open from 7 a.m. in the mornings until 5 in the afternoons. Or you can also send a please call me, and I'm going to try to read that number slowly. So 079 835 7179, and then they will call you back. Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye.